A door you didn't know was there. There comes a moment in life, subtle, often unannounced, when the world grows quieter, but your inner voice grows louder. Maybe it happens while you're washing a single teacup at the sink, and the light through the window looks like something you've never seen before, even though it's always been there. Or maybe it sneaks in when your favorite song from 1978 plays on the radio, and the lyrics land differently, not as memory, but as prophecy. And sometimes, it happens when you're 62, sitting alone in your living room, holding a photograph you forgot was in that drawer. In it, you're younger, radiant, busy. The kids are toddlers. You're wearing a watch you haven't owned in years. You remember the moment, but this time, looking at it, you don't just feel nostalgia. You feel a question rising in your chest. Where did it all go? It's not regret, not yet. It's recognition, a shift, a sacred disorientation. And then comes the next whisper, as natural as breath. What now? This, right here, is the doorway. And if you're willing, Buddhism offers you the key. A message for the listener. If you're listening to this, whether you're in your 30s worrying about your parents, in your 50s feeling time accelerate, or over 60 facing the mirror and wondering who you are without the titles, the schedule, the important things, this story is for you. This isn't a guidebook to aging. This is an invitation to awakening. Because the truth is, life is short, but within that brevity lies a vast, sacred opportunity, especially after 60, to live not harder, not faster, but deeper, softer, clearer. That's what this journey is about. Not the ending of life, but the opening of it. Not fading, but finally seeing. Not decline, but arrival. In this series, we follow the story of Anna and Claire, two women in different stages of life beyond 60. Their journeys, across gardens and grief, stillness and community, solitude and spiritual clarity, are not extraordinary because of any grand achievements. They are extraordinary because they begin to live with intention, to notice, to feel, to remember the sacredness in the ordinary, and perhaps, most profoundly, to make peace with the truth that nothing, not even us, lasts forever. A different kind of story. Most stories about aging are written from the outside, clinical, statistical, framed in terms of productivity or care systems or economic burden. But this is not that kind of story. This is a story from the inside, from the soul, a story told through Buddhist eyes, where every wrinkle is a sutra, every silence a bell, every ordinary moment a chance to touch eternity. You won't hear us talk much about retirement funds or diet trends. Instead, you'll hear about tulips blooming late in spring, letters never sent, the sound of snow melting off a rooftop, a porch shared with a neighbor's dog, the warmth of a worn prayer shawl on a winter night. Because these are the real treasures, and they are yours to claim. Why after 60? There's a strange, unspoken mythology in Western culture that after 60, life shrinks. The kids are grown. The career is winding down. The body starts to complain. Invitations lessen. Roles change. The mirror tells a different story than it once did. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. In Buddhist traditions, aging is not an inconvenience. It is an initiation, a ripening, a softening of ego and ambition, and a blossoming of insight and compassion. It's when you no longer confuse your job title with your worth, your calendar with your joy, your reflection with your essence. It's when you finally have time, not to fill, but to feel. A personal note from this channel. Here at Buddhism in Every Moment, we don't make content for entertainment. We create offerings, sacred offerings, from our heart to yours. Because we believe that even a single moment of presence, of truly feeling the breath, hearing the rain, or forgiving a long-held grudge, is more powerful than 100 hours of distraction. And if you're here, if something brought you to this video, maybe there's something inside you that's ready to awaken. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a way that feels like coming home. This journey will take you through gardens and quiet porches, through solitude that transforms into sacred presence, through conversations that echo wisdom passed down through centuries, through laughter shared between elders rediscovering their purpose, through grief held gently, not as something to escape, but as something that holds the shape of love, through aging not as loss, but as liberation, through death not as an enemy, but as a teacher of what it means to truly live, and through every breath of this life, brief, beautiful, fleeting, as a holy thing. What to expect? This series is divided into 6 chapters, each exploring a facet of life after 60 through the lens of Buddhist wisdom and personal story. The wake-up bell. Why time feels faster after 60. The art of slowing down, living fully in the ordinary. The mindful body, caring for this sacred vessel. The heart that opens, deepening relationships with wisdom. The inner garden, cultivating purpose and spiritual practice. The sacred mirror, embracing death with grace and living fully now. You may listen all at once, or one part per day. You may cry, you may pause, you may reach for a notebook, or a friend. That's welcome here. This is not something to get through. This is something to enter. With breath, with openness, with the wisdom already alive inside you. Before we begin, take a moment, now, yes, right now, to find stillness. Place your feet on the ground. Feel the breath in your body. Close your eyes, if you wish, and whisper gently, I am still here. That in itself is a miracle. And this journey, this brief, beautiful human life, is still unfolding. The cherry blossoms may be late. The knees may ache. The mirror may surprise you. But you are not done. You are just beginning. Let's begin. When time feels different after 60. There's a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when time begins to feel different. For Anna, it came one spring morning in Asheville, North Carolina, as she stood barefoot in her small garden, the earth still moist from last night's rain. The cherry blossoms were late that year, but the tulips pushed through regardless, as if to remind her that life insists on blooming. even when it's not convenient. She had just turned 63, and for the first time in decades, she wasn't rushing to meet a deadline, wasn't packing a suitcase, wasn't checking her email before sunrise. Retirement had technically begun 3 months earlier, but the inner shift, the real awakening, arrived only that morning. "I'm not young anymore," she whispered aloud, not in sadness, but in awe. Then came the second whisper, "But I'm still here. What now?" What now, is the question that every soul eventually faces. Sometimes too late, but for those who are willing to listen, truly listen, it becomes a gateway, not a graveyard, and for those who dare to look through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, the final chapters of life become not a winding down, but a waking up. This part of life, especially after 60, offers something that no youth can replicate: clarity. And if you let it, this clarity becomes a compass. Let's begin. The illusion of later. Throughout most of our lives, we are sold the myth of later. Later, we'll travel. Later, we'll write that book. Later, we'll sit by the ocean and actually feel it. But later is a seductive thief. It keeps us busy while quietly robbing us of the now. Buddhism has always taught that impermanence is not something to be feared, but embraced. It's the teacher that reminds us, every breath is a miracle, every morning a clean canvas. For Anna, the garden became her meditation cushion. Each weed she pulled was a chance to examine something she had ignored. Each breeze carried memories she had long forgotten. She began to notice how many days she had spent hurrying toward a future that never arrived. It wasn't regret, it was recognition. Rediscovering time as a sacred resource. Time is no longer money. That illusion burned away with the last office key she handed in. Time now is presence. It's currency that buys meaning, not productivity. She no longer measured a day by what she accomplished, but by how deeply she felt. One afternoon, Anna met a Buddhist monk named Kensho at a local retreat center. He had been living in the Smoky Mountains for over 40 years. They sat under a willow tree, sipping green tea. Anna confessed her fear. "I'm afraid I'll waste these years, too, just in a slower way." Kensho smiled. "Then don't live slower. Live deeper." It was the kind of wisdom that didn't sound profound until it settled into your bones. Choosing depth over pace. In our earlier decades, we are pulled by ambition, pressure, roles, all necessary forces. But after 60, there is a rare window to reverse the current. Buddhist teachings encourage us to move from doing to being. Anna started to rise with the sun, not to get ahead, but to simply witness it. She cooked with 2 hands instead of 1 on her phone. She listened, really listened, when her neighbor told stories of his late wife. And slowly, the narrative in her head shifted from, "I should be doing something," to, "This moment is enough." She started to taste the tea. Not just drink it, a practice. The one thing ritual. Anna adopted a ritual that Kensho suggested. Each morning, choose one thing to do with full presence. Just one. Some days, It was journaling by the window. Some days, folding laundry. Some days, watching the clouds roll over the Blue Ridge Mountains. This, one thing, became sacred. It slowed her mind, softened her breath, and returned her to herself. You don't need 10 hours of meditation or a plane ticket to Bhutan. Sometimes, it's just letting the moment bloom. The shift from time killer to time giver. One of the most dangerous habits we inherit in modern culture is killing time. We scroll to numb, binge to escape, fill our calendars to feel valuable. But Buddhist insight invites us to be time givers instead. Give your time to wonder. Give your time to silence. Give your time to healing old wounds. When Anna visited her estranged sister in Savannah for the first time in 20 years, it wasn't because it was convenient. It was because, for the first time, she realized that withholding love is also a form of wasting life. That visit wasn't perfect. They cried more than they laughed. But they sat together in a way they never had. The time was given, not spent. The gift of slowness. After 60, the world expects you to slow down. But slowness isn't the problem, it's the gateway. Slowness, when embraced consciously, is not about fading, it's about feeling. Anna walked slower now, not because her joints hurt, but because she wanted to see the petals on the sidewalk. She spoke more slowly, not from forgetfulness, but from intention. She loved more slowly, with attention, not urgency, and in that slowness, she began to feel something sacred, peace. Closing reflection. When time begins to feel different, don't panic, don't fill it with noise. Sit with it, listen to it, ask it what it's been trying to tell you all these years. Anna once thought the best years were behind her. Now, each morning she wakes up and whispers to herself, "This could be the most beautiful day of my life." Sometimes, she's right. In part 2, we'll follow Anna as she begins to explore the emotional and spiritual landscapes of aging, especially the fear of irrelevance, and how Buddhist wisdom offers a gentle but powerful antidote: belonging without performance. The quiet power of simply being. It was a rainy afternoon in Sedona, Arizona, when Anna stood before a mirror in a small Airbnb. The light outside turned the red rocks a deeper shade of rust. Inside, her reflection revealed something more intimate, not just the lines around her eyes, but the silence within them. "I used to matter more," she thought, not bitterly, not with envy, just truthfully. She wasn't the one who got urgent emails anymore. No one asked her opinion at board meetings. Invitations slowed. Her old students stopped calling. Even her children, now raising families of their own, spoke to her with love, but also with distance. That day, standing barefoot on cool tile, Anna realized something. She had spent most of her life proving her worth by being relevant, being needed, praised, consulted, chosen, and now, stripped of all that external validation, the question echoed inside her like thunder over desert canyons. Who am I when I'm not important? The soft ego death. In Buddhist teaching, ego is not inherently evil. It's simply mistaken. It believes we are the roles we play: teacher, parent, director, achiever. But roles end, names fade, trophies gather dust. And so, Buddhism offers a radical freedom. You are not your relevance. You are not your resume. You are not your usefulness to others. For Anna, this was a tender ego death, not violent, not dramatic, just necessary. She began sitting in meditation more often, not to escape, but to meet herself beyond the mask. And what she found startled her. There was still joy, there was still love, and it didn't need an audience. The shift from doing to witnessing. We live in a culture that rewards doing endlessly. But as Anna began to study the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, she discovered the grace of witnessing. She didn't have to host the party. She could admire the way her daughter hosted it. She didn't have to lead the conversation. She could marvel at the quiet humor of her grandson. She didn't have to advise, she could observe, trust, and let life unfold. That was the magic. Witnessing without inserting herself. Her worth was no longer dependent on being the center. She was the calm perimeter, the circle, the sky, the joy of invisibility. This may sound odd, but let's say it plainly. Sometimes, after 60, you become invisible to the world. Sales clerks overlook you. Young people interrupt you. Society's advertisements stop aiming at you. And yet, invisibility, when not resented, becomes a superpower. Anna began to cherish this new anonymity. She could sit in a cafe unnoticed, watch lovers argue tenderly, see a mother nurse in the corner booth, observe the life she once lived. Without performance, no one expected anything from her anymore. Which meant, she could finally be everything she already was. Practice. The sacred pause. Anna took on a new ritual called the sacred pause, inspired by Pema Chodron. Each day, before reacting, before commenting, before replying, before fixing, she would pause, breathe, feel, and only then choose. She found that most of her urge to intervene came from a place of wanting to be relevant, not necessarily helpful. By pausing, she gave space for life to unfold without her control. The pause became holy. It was her way of replacing the need to prove with the joy of presence. Relevance versus resonance. Here's a distinction Buddhist wisdom helped Anna uncover. Relevance is about status. Resonance is about soul. She may no longer be at the center of attention, but her presence resonated. Her gentle listening, her grounded stillness, her ability to sit with a friend's grief without offering solutions. People started to come to her, not for answers, but for her being. She was becoming like the mountain, not loud, but unshakable, the unseen work of the wise. There's a quiet labor that elders do, one that is rarely applauded. They hold space for others. They model grace through grief. They carry memory like an old photograph, fading but sacred. Anna began to see herself not as less useful, but as sacred infrastructure, like roots holding soil after a storm. She didn't need to be loud. She didn't need to be fast. She just needed to be whole. A new kind of offering. Instead of advice, she offered presence. Instead of direction, she offered example. Instead of relevance, she offered rhythm. She walked with a neighbor's dog every afternoon, not because it was noble, but because rhythm soothes the soul. She wrote handwritten letters to people she hadn't seen in years, not to reconnect, but to release. She sat on her porch during dusk, sipping tea with a quiet smile, not because it mattered, but because it did. Closing reflection. Relevance fades, always, but wisdom deepens. There is no billboard for presence, no spotlight for patience, no trophy for kindness, but those are the real legacies of a life well lived. Anna was no longer needed in the way she used to be. She was something better. She was trusted. She was still. She was wise. From loneliness to sacred connection. It was the middle of winter in Taos, New Mexico. Snow fell slowly outside the wide windows of Anna's rented cabin. The world was hushed, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, only vast. Inside, a single mug of peppermint tea steamed on the table. She was alone, not just in the room, but in life. Her husband had passed away 5 years ago. Her closest friends were scattered across states, some gone entirely. Her daughter visited, but not often, and though she appreciated the solitude, there were moments, unexpected, sharp, when a memory, a silence, or even a bird call outside would pierce through her like cold wind. I am truly alone, and it scared her. The weight of modern loneliness. In Buddhist psychology, suffering is often described as dukkha, not just pain, but dislocation, a sense that something isn't quite right. Loneliness, then, isn't only the absence of company, but the ache of feeling disconnected from the living world. Anna began noticing when loneliness came. At night, while brushing her teeth in silence, while cooking too much food, forgetting she lived alone, when laughter came from neighbors' windows, and none from her own. It wasn't constant, but when it came with sharpness, rather than push it away. She chose a Buddhist approach. She welcomed it, befriending loneliness, inspired by the teachings of Tara Brach and Ajahn Susito. Anna began to treat loneliness as a visitor, not an enemy. When the feeling came, she lit a candle. She'd sit quietly and whisper, "Oh, it's you again," instead of turning on the TV or scrolling through her phone. She would journal. What is this emptiness trying to teach me today? And slowly, a truth emerged. Loneliness is the call to reconnect, not just with others, but with your own presence. Rediscovering the sacred in the simple. Each morning, she walked the snowy trail behind her cabin. At first, it felt like a routine. But then, it transformed. She began to notice the sound of her boots crunching in fresh snow, the pattern of pine needles pressed into ice, a single raven perched on a branch, looking at her as if to say, "You are not forgotten." In these silent encounters, Anna realized something radical. She wasn't alone. She was in relationship with the trees, the wind, her breath, the sky. She just hadn't been listening closely enough. Solitude versus isolation. Western culture often conflates solitude with sadness. But Buddhism reminds us, solitude is where we return to ourselves. It's the ground from which we bloom. Anna journaled a distinction one morning. Isolation is disconnection from everything. Solitude is deep connection with everything that's not human. And so, she began to treasure her mornings as sacred. She called it her returning hour, the moment she returned to presence, to the sacred hum beneath all things. Practices that transformed her solitude. Loving kindness meditation, metta. Instead of trying to fill the void, Anna practiced radiating kindness, first to herself, then to others, near or far. Each morning, she sat quietly and repeated, "May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease." Then she'd say it for her daughter, her late husband, a grocery clerk she once smiled at, a friend she hadn't spoken to in years. Her heart softened, her world expanded. Writing letters never sent, she began a ritual of writing letters she would never mail. Letters to her husband, her mother, her past self, her future self. In doing so, she gave voice to what was trapped inside. The cabin felt warmer afterward, as if her words stitched invisible thread between her and the people she loved. Sacred listening. One day, she took a vow. No music. No podcasts. No voices for a week. Just nature. She listened, really listened, to wind through pine, to the distant call of coyotes, to snow melting off the roof in rhythmic drips. Solitude, she realized, wasn't quiet. It was a symphony. What solitude revealed. As the days passed, Anna wrote in her journal, "I thought solitude would make me feel smaller. But it has made me feel wide, like the sky." In Buddhist thought, there is no fixed self. We are all interbeing, always in relationship with the world. Even when alone, she began to see her solitude not as a lack, but as a canvas, where she could listen to her soul's whispers, where she could cry without shame, where she could rediscover the small joys, hot tea, sunlight through curtains, her own breath. She was not waiting for company. She was becoming it. Story within the story. The monk at Banff. During this time, Anna read the story of a monk in Banff, Canada, who had lived in a cabin for 12 winters. When asked if he ever felt lonely, he smiled and said, "I am never lonely. I am crowded with trees, wind, silence, and God." That line stayed with her. It redefined her winter. She was crowded too, with memory, with quiet beauty, with her own slow awakening. From empty house to sacred hermitage, she began to call her cabin a hermitage. Not to isolate, but to honor. She brought in a few plants, a prayer bowl, a small painting of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Each morning, she lit incense, not for anyone else, just as a gesture of reverence. And in doing so, the space transformed, not into a temple for worship, but a sanctuary for being. Embracing change, movement, and inner vitality after 60. On the first morning of spring in Taos, the sunlight stretched long and golden across the wooden floor of Anna's cabin. The snow had melted into soft earth, For the first time in months, she opened the door wide, not just for air, but for life. She stood barefoot on the cool porch, her body, slightly hunched and aching from winter stillness, whispered a quiet request, "Move me." And so, she did. That day would begin Anna's journey not just into healing her body, but into reclaiming it as sacred space. As a temple, as a wise teacher, letting go of the old story. For most of her life, Anna viewed her body as a problem to fix. Too heavy, too soft, too tired, too slow. After turning 60, the list of complaints seemed to multiply. Her knees ached, her balance wavered, her energy dipped in unpredictable waves. She had begun to internalize a common myth in Western aging, that decline is inevitable, and that the body is a burden. But Buddhism teaches a different view. The body is impermanent, yes, but it is also a doorway. A gateway to presence, a sacred vessel carrying wisdom and memory. Not something to fight, but something to listen to. Anna began the radical act of befriending her body, as it was. Movement as medicine. Rather than starting with grand routines, Anna began simply, stretching each morning with the rising sun, walking slowly in the meadow barefoot, feeling the dew, practicing gentle qigong in her cabin, following YouTube videos by a smiling man in Taipei. She discovered something unexpected. As she moved slowly and with reverence, her body responded with gratitude. Pain lessened, breath deepened, her posture softened, but most importantly, her inner voice changed. From, "I'm too old for this," to, "Look what I still get to feel." The Buddhist body. In many Buddhist traditions, the body is not ignored, it is deeply honored. Meditation often begins with awareness of the body. The rising and falling of breath in the belly. The feeling of the cushion beneath your seat. The warmth in your hands or tension in your jaw. Thich Nhat Hanh taught, your body is a piece of the cosmos. Breathe in, and know you are alive. Anna took this to heart. Each morning, she placed her hands on her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I am still here," dancing with impermanence. One morning, she found an old jazz record. On impulse, she played it, loud, and began to move. She wasn't performing. She wasn't exercising. She was dancing with life. She twirled slowly in her flannel pajamas, arms loose, heart open, laughing with no audience. Her hips cracked, her breath shortened, but her spirit soared. She wrote later in her journal, "This isn't the body I had at 30. It's better. It knows sorrow. It knows how to rise again." Embracing the changing form, instead of resisting change, Anna began to observe it with curiosity. Her hands were more wrinkled now, but they had held a child. Cooked thousands of meals, cradled grief and joy. Her face was softer, gentler, the lines etched with stories. Even her gray hair, once dyed and denied, now framed her face like winter clouds around a mountain. She no longer asked her body to be young. She asked it to be true. When the body says stop, not all days were graceful. Some mornings, she ached too much to stretch. Some days, She felt dizzy from low blood pressure. Her digestion changed. She had to pee more often. She napped longer than expected. At first, this frustrated her, but then she remembered the monk's teaching she'd read. Rest is also practice. Stillness is a form of prayer. So she began honoring rest with the same reverence as movement. A nap was no longer laziness. It was sacred. Rituals of care. Anna began creating small rituals that honored her body. She massaged her feet with warm oil each night. She placed a warm towel over her face and whispered affirmations. She kept fresh water by her bed, reminding herself, hydration is love. These acts weren't about luxury. They were about presence. Tending to the body became a spiritual practice, a chance to slow down and say, "Thank you for carrying me." The body's quiet messages. One day, while meditating, Anna had a realization. My body has been speaking to me for years. I was just too distracted to listen. Now, she paid attention. Tension in her shoulders meant worry. Shallow breath meant fear. Heavy legs meant she needed stillness. Tingling in her hands meant joy. Her body was not betraying her. It was guiding her. The breath as bridge. When Anna felt overwhelmed by emotion, by memory, by life, she returned to the simplest tool, her breath. In Buddhist practice, the breath is not just oxygen. It is a reminder of presence. Each inhale, a chance to return. Each exhale, a chance to let go. She practiced what Thich Nhat Hanh called breathing with love. Inhale. I breathe in love for this body. Exhale. I let go of judgment. Over time, her breath became an anchor, a home, a prayer. Story within the story. The Japanese gardener. In Kyoto, there's a story of a 92-year-old Zen gardener named Hiroshi. Each morning, he tended to his moss garden with slow, deliberate movements. When asked how he managed this at his age, he smiled. I do not rush. I do not resist. I do not forget this is a gift. Anna pasted that quote on her mirror. She adopted Hiroshi's pace, and her days began to bloom. Reframing the narrative. Society tells us that aging means loss of beauty, ability, vitality. But Anna had discovered a secret. Aging also means arrival. Arrival into presence. Arrival into wisdom. Arrival into the full expression of oneself, without apology. Her body had changed, but so had her heart. And it was wide enough now to hold it all, the sagging skin, the slow knees, the radiant spirit inside. Final reflection. To be over 60 is not to be past your prime. It is to be entering a new temple, one where the walls creak, the roof leaks, but the light inside is more golden than ever. Anna now bows each morning not to a deity, but to her own reflection. Not in worship, but in reverence. Her body, soft, scarred, alive, was no longer her enemy. It was her oldest, most faithful companion, and she would walk with it, lovingly, all the way home, building legacy through connection, compassion, and community. The day Anna turned 65, she didn't throw a party or travel abroad. Instead, She stood quietly on the porch of the community center in Taos, a plate of homemade lemon bars in her hand, and knocked on the door of the weekly elders' circle for the first time. She was nervous. What would they talk about? Would she be welcome? Was it too late to belong somewhere new? The door opened. "Ah, you must be Anna," smiled Gloria, a woman with silver dreadlocks and an apron dusted in flour. "We've been waiting for you." And just like that, a new chapter began. Loneliness is not just an emotion, it's a modern epidemic. In the years after retirement, Anna had often felt adrift, though she was never technically alone. She began to sense the quiet ache of disconnection. It wasn't the absence of people. It was the absence of deep, meaningful belonging. And this is more common than most admit. In the U.S., over 40% of adults over 60 report feeling lonely regularly. It is a public health issue with effects as dangerous as smoking or obesity. But in Buddhism, the cure isn't productivity, it's Sangha. Sangha, the sacred community. The power of Sangha, Buddhist community in everyday life. In Buddhist teaching, Sangha is one of the three jewels, alongside the Buddha and the Dharma. It's the reminder that spiritual practice is not a solo journey. It's relational. It's rooted in compassion, listening, presence, and support. For Anna, joining the elders' circle wasn't just social, it was healing. Each week, they gathered in a circle of mismatched chairs, poured tea, shared stories of their week, and sat in stillness. There was no agenda, just presence. Legacy is not what you leave behind, it's what you share while alive. Anna used to think of legacy as something written on a gravestone or passed down in a will. But as weeks turned into months at the center, she saw another version. Legacy was teaching a teenager how to cook a family recipe, volunteering at the community garden and planting seeds she wouldn't live to see bloom, listening to a grieving neighbor without offering advice, just presence, sharing a story at a funeral that made everyone laugh through tears. Legacy was a verb. It was daily, giving and receiving, the circular dance. One morning, Anna brought soup to Jorge, a neighbor in his 70s recovering from hip surgery. He was gruff, quiet, not one for visitors. But as she ladled broth into a bowl, he looked at her with tears in his eyes. "No one's ever done this for me since my wife passed." It was a simple act, but it broke open something vast. From that day forward, they exchanged more than soup. They shared memories, regrets, old music, silly jokes. Giving became receiving, and both were holy. Buddhist wisdom on compassion. In Buddhist thought, compassion, karuna, is not pity. It's not about feeling sorry for someone. It's the deep, active desire to relieve suffering, to walk alongside someone in their humanity. As the Dalai Lama teaches, compassion is the radicalism of our time. For Anna, this meant listening without interrupting, hugging someone who hadn't been touched in days, writing handwritten letters to friends she hadn't seen in years, forgiving someone who had never apologized, and meaning it. Story within the story. The monk and the widow. Anna once read about a Buddhist monk in Vietnam who visited a widow each day for 100 days after her husband's death. He never offered advice. He simply sat and listened. On the 101st day, the woman smiled and said, "You never told me how to move on. But now, I don't feel so alone. And that is enough." Sometimes, presence is the answer. Nature as community. Anna also found connection beyond people. She joined a local hiking group of women over 60. They named themselves the Walking Wild. They walked in silence through pine forests, shared tea on mountain ridges, and created a WhatsApp group called Nature is Our Therapist. She felt less isolated when she saw herself as part of a greater whole, a web of living things. The river, the birds, the wind, all were her companions. New roles, new joys. Retirement didn't mean stagnation. In community, Anna found new roles. She became the unofficial poet laureate of the center. She led meditations for beginners. She started a story night, where elders could share life tales with the youth. These weren't just hobbies. They were ways of being seen, needed, valued, healing through shared grief. One evening, during a winter storm, the group held a candlelight circle for Dolores, a member who had passed peacefully at 87. Each person shared a memory. Anna read a haiku Dolores once wrote. "Evening rain again. My hands remember your hands. Still warm in goodbye." There were tears, but also laughter. In grief, the community became even more alive. The quiet revolution of belonging. We live in a culture that glorifies independence. But aging teaches interdependence. It reveals that we are not meant to go it alone. True freedom, Buddhism reminds us, is not found in isolation, but in compassionate interconnection. And connection is not just a support system. It's a spiritual practice. Practical ideas to build connection after 60. Join or create a weekly gathering for open-hearted discussion or spiritual practice. Start a shared meal night in your neighborhood, rotating hosts. Potluck style. Volunteer at a local library, animal shelter, or community garden. Record your life story as a gift for future generations. Mentor someone younger in your field or life experience. Write gratitude letters, one per week, to people who've impacted you. Final reflection. Anna no longer feared being forgotten. She was not waiting for someone to remember her name after she died. She was living in a way that left warmth in every room she entered. Belonging is not something you find. It's something you build. With kindness, with presence, with courage to knock on a door, lemon bars in hand, and say, "I'm here." And somewhere inside, a voice will answer, "We've been waiting for you." Embracing death with grace and living fully now. A late October sun dipped behind the aspen trees in Sedona, scattering gold across the ground like coins from an unseen world. Claire, now 72, sat barefoot on the porch of her desert cabin, sipping tea brewed with dried chrysanthemum petals. She wasn't afraid of dying anymore. Not because she knew what came after, but because she had finally learned how to live. And in doing so, She made peace with letting go. This final part is not about endings. It's about embracing life with such fullness that even death feels like a gentle exhale. Death is not the opposite of life. It's a part of it. In the West, death is often feared, hidden, whispered about in hospital corridors and nursing homes. But in Buddhist traditions, particularly those from Tibet, Bhutan, and parts of Japan, death is not a taboo. It's a teacher. In monasteries, monks meditate beside cremation grounds. They reflect on impermanence not to induce despair, but to awaken urgency and appreciation. As the Buddha taught, of all footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Of all contemplations, that of impermanence is supreme. The mirror of mortality. Seeing life more clearly. Claire's turning point came when she lost her closest friend, Evelyn, to a quiet and peaceful illness. Evelyn's final words weren't of regret. They were of gratitude. For the walks we took. For the argument we never resolved but loved through anyway. For the fact that I got to live. Even once. That night, Claire walked into her living room, opened her journal, and wrote, "Death, you are my sacred mirror. Every time I see you, I see myself more clearly." From that day on, she made choices as if her time was limited. Because it was. Mindfulness of death, the Maranasati practice. In Theravada Buddhism, there's a meditation called Maranasati, the recollection of death. But it's not morbid. It's liberating. Claire adopted this practice by asking herself one question each morning. If today were my last, how would I speak? What would I do? What would I let go of? The answers weren't dramatic. Sometimes, it meant calling her son just to say, "I love you." Sometimes, it meant forgiving someone who hadn't said sorry. Sometimes, it meant watching the clouds roll by without rushing to productivity. Impermanence as a gift. Buddhism teaches the law of anicca, that all things are impermanent. And for Claire, this no longer felt tragic. It felt beautiful. The cherry blossoms bloom only for a week. The full moon lasts just a night. The laughter of a grandchild echoes briefly before quiet returns. If nothing is permanent, then everything is precious. Saying goodbye while we're still here. Claire began writing goodbye letters. Not because she was dying, but because she was finally living. She mailed them without ceremony. To my brother, who always made me laugh in the hardest years. Thank you. To my first love. I carry the way you looked at me in 1973 like a secret treasure. To myself at age 40, I forgive you. She even held a living funeral, inspired by Japanese tradition, where loved ones gathered to say all the things people usually wait too long to say. There were tears, but also relief. And laughter. Rituals of transition. Honoring the sacred. Claire designed her own death plan, not out of fear, but as an act of kindness. She chose her favorite folk songs for her memorial. She asked for a biodegradable urn to nourish a tree. She requested a circle gathering, not a formal service. She left a box of letters to the future, for her grandchildren. To be opened when they turn 30. Each step helped her feel more present, not less. Planning for death made space for life. Stories from the world. Facing mortality with light. In Bhutan, people are taught from childhood to think of death 5 times a day. Why? Because they believe it makes you happier. In the Philippines, elders tell stories while weaving their own funeral blankets, preparing for the journey with color and pride. In parts of New Mexico, Day of the Dead altars are filled with marigolds, photos, and chocolate, not grief, but celebration. These cultures remind us, death is not failure. It's nature. The last lesson, non-attachment, not indifference. Claire once asked a Buddhist nun, "How do you love fully when you know everything changes?" The nun replied with a smile, "Like flowers, you love them more because they will wilt. Detachment isn't coldness, it's warmth without clinging. It's holding someone's hand knowing you can't keep it forever, and loving them even more because of that." Each morning is a beginning. In her final year, Claire woke up each day with a mantra. "I don't know how long I have, but I know I'm alive today." She made tea, listened to birds, forgave easily, said thank you more often. When people asked if she was afraid of what came next, she'd chuckle, "No, I'm just afraid of wasting the day I still have." Practical practices to embrace mortality. Write your own eulogy, then live into it. Have a legacy conversation with someone you trust. Practice a weekly gratitude for today journal. Spend time in nature observing impermanence, falling leaves, changing light. Create a digital memory box of photos, voice notes, and letters. Let go of one grudge, just one. This moment is the temple. There's a stillness at the end of a journey, not an end, but a settling, like dust after footsteps, like breath after prayer. And if you're still here, still listening, still breathing, still feeling, then you already know. This isn't a goodbye. This is a beginning. Because after everything, after gardens and grief, laughter and loss, silence and song, what remains is this. This moment. Not tomorrow, not 10 years ago. Just this. Right here. Right now. You. Alive. And the Buddha would tell you, that is enough. The sacred arrival. Most of us live as if we're preparing for life. For the real thing. As if meaning is always just around the corner. After retirement. After the grandkids visit. After the body feels better. After the world calms down. But what if this? The aching knees. The quiet room. The sip of tea while birdsong lingers outside the window. What if this is it? Not a rehearsal. Not a detour. But the temple itself. Buddhism teaches us not to chase the next thing, but to arrive. To land. To see. You've walked through 6 reflections. 6 doors. Each one revealing that aging is not about fading, but clarifying. That after 60, life doesn't shrink. It deepens. It opens. It simplifies, not into emptiness, but into essence. The noise begins to fall away. And what's left is the sacred. A garden you carry. Perhaps you remember Anna, standing barefoot in her garden in Asheville, whispering to herself, I'm not young anymore, but I'm still here. What now? Claire, on her porch in Sedona, unafraid of dying because she had finally learned how to live. They weren't saints. They weren't monks in temples. They were women with aching hips, unpaid bills, scattered photo albums, ordinary griefs, and extraordinary courage. And in them, we saw ourselves, our own longings, our own questions, our own quiet awakenings. Their stories were not about them. They were mirrors. For you, the teachings that linger. What did you carry from this journey? Was it the one thing ritual? To do one thing each day with full presence? Was it the sacred pause, that moment before reacting, where you breathe instead? Was it the vow to love like flowers, not despite impermanence, but because of it? Was it a letter unwritten that now feels ready to be sent? Was it the sudden urge to sit beneath a tree and simply listen? These teachings weren't meant to stay in a notebook or a video. They were meant to be lived. In your body, your breath, your relationships, your tea. Aging is a return, not a decline. Western culture tells us that aging is about deterioration, slowing down, stepping back. But in Buddhism, aging is seen differently. It is ripening. It is release. It is the softening of the ego's grip, the loosening of the world's demands, and the opening of the heart. When you are no longer performing, you begin to witness. When you are no longer achieving, you begin to simply be. And that is when the deepest wisdom arises. Not in your 30s, not in your peak career, but here, when you are quiet enough to hear your own soul again. You are not behind. You are right on time. The invitation remains. We offered 6 doors. A new way to see time, not as a threat, but a canvas. A new way to see slowness, not as decline, but depth. A new way to see the body, not as enemy, but sacred companion. A new way to see connection, not as relevance, but resonance. A new way to see solitude, not as absence, but intimacy. A new way to see death, not as ending, but teacher. But the real work begins now, in the ordinary spaces of your life. This moment, the sink full of dishes, the wrinkle around your eye, the silence after the call ends. These are not interruptions to your practice. They are the practice. What will you do with this day? You don't need to become a monk. You don't need to move to a temple in Nepal. You don't need to renounce your belongings or wear a robe. You only need to remember that life is short, and holy, and happening right now. So, what will you do with this day? Not what will you accomplish, but how will you arrive in it? Can you walk to your mailbox as if it were a pilgrimage? Can you eat breakfast as if it were an offering? Can you hold your loved one's hand without rushing to the next thing? This is not just mindfulness. This is reverence. You are the temple. Buddhism teaches that the sacred is not elsewhere. It is not on a mountaintop. It is not after enlightenment. It is not after everything is perfect. It is in you. The breath in your lungs. The grief you carry. The joy that surprises you when a baby giggles in the grocery line. You are not waiting to become worthy. You are already holy ground. And the world needs that holiness now, more than ever. Legacy is now. We speak often of legacy. But perhaps it's simpler than we thought. Legacy is not what people say about you at your funeral. It's the warmth that lingers in a room you left 10 minutes ago. It's the calm you bring to a tense conversation. It's the handwritten note someone keeps in a drawer for 10 years. It's the way your grandchild speaks to others, because of how you spoke to them. It's the presence you offer, even when you're tired, even when you're scared. Legacy is presence, and presence is now. The final practice. Let's end with one practice. Right now, pause. Close your eyes. If it feels safe, feel your breath. Place your hand over your heart. And repeat silently, I am alive. This is enough. I will meet this day with gentleness. I will honor this life, not with noise, but with presence. I will love what I can while I'm here. And I will let go when it's time, with grace. Breathe. Feel that? That's you. Here. Now. Still sacred. Still becoming. Still home.